call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. This is a regular board meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District for Saturday, January 11th. It's 8 a.m. Peter, roll call.
Sure. Perot?
Hi.
Are you here? No, the question is, are you here?
Early, but I try to manage.
Hello. Yeah, hi.
Rick Hirsch?
Here.
Dornbrook here, and O'Grady here. Okay, all present and accounted for.
Okay. Rick, do you know if there are any announcements to be made?
There usually is, but I don't have the jargon. However, this is a public broadcasted meeting. If anybody from the public or watching online would like to send comments or recommendations, they could send it to, right now, ransel@kmpud.com. And then when Eric Christensen, general manager, arrives, they could send it to him.
Yeah, which would be E. Christensen.
At KMPUD.com, correct. Okay. And I apologize for not having that up usually.
That's quite
I
all
have
right.
a cheat sheet here, but
Are there any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar? None? Okay. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the board on a matter that's not on today's agenda? Jeff.
Jeff Brown.
Welcome, by the way. Welcome. Thanks for coming up.
Our consent for Tuesday will be an ordinance on noise ordinance that we're going to be approving, and it should go into effect in 30 days. It's 9.44 of our new county code, and so it's a very limited noise ordinance. It was especially made for rentals, short-term rentals, where the owner of the property is absent from the property, and so it's a very easy ordinance. It's not very restrictive, but it allows the sheriff department to visit and allows the county code to put an ordinance citation against the owner of the property.
And since I think it's the Alpine County Sheriff that covers here, right? Your sheriff doesn't come up here, does he?
Very limited, but he can.
Okay. Do you happen to know, could the Alpine County Sheriff
That I do not.
administer that? Okay.
That I do not. I mean, I would just, I don't know what our mutual aid between Alpine and Amador is.
Right there.
What was the question?
We're talking about.
Do we have a mutual aid?
Just say yes.
Alpine and Amador?
I'm sure we do, but I don't know what the means.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that information.
Welcome.
Hi, Frank.
Good morning, Larry.
We're on comments from the audience. If there's anything that's not on today's agenda? Okay, we move on to the adoption of the consent calendar. The items that we would be approving on the consent calendar are the special board meeting minutes of December 13th, the consent for claims, the receivables and shutoffs report, and Resolution 20-01 updating Bank of the West account signatories.
I would move that we adopt the consent calendar as presented.
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay, we now go on to item 8, and time to meet our new Kirkwood Mountain Resort General Manager, Matt Jones. Hi, Matt.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for having me. I apologize. I didn't realize with the firm that I was on the December agenda, so that was an issue on our end. So I apologize for not being here at the last meeting, but appreciate the time. Figured I'd just give a little bit of my background, and then if there was any questions. I spent 21 years with Vail Resorts, 20 of those spent in the mountains of Colorado. Mostly in the HR function. In the last couple of years, I ran the HR operations for our 5 Colorado resorts, as well as our employee housing function. We brought that in-house to be able to run that and have more control and the experience for our employees and drive that business a little bit more as we were trying to grow it. So that was the last 2 years, and over the last several years, 10 of the years before that, I was spent at Vail Mountain on the senior leadership team there, directly working with that team. Yeah, and this was, in terms of my operations focus, this was something for a while that I wanted to get back over to the operational side of things. So, doing a lot of work preparing for this move. What I would say is there's been a lot of movement in our company, and for me, I've been pretty particular about what I wanted to do professionally and personally for my family. My wife and I, we have 2 boys, 6 and 10. I do have to sneak out of here afterwards because I've got to get them to the Jets program. They're already deep into the skiing here. But we made it a priority for us to be able to raise our boys in the mountains. They were both born up in Eagle County outside of Vail and Beaver Creek and love skiing in the outdoors just like we do. So when the opportunity here came up, this was a natural fit for me, both the area, but certainly this mountain and the passion that our employees have for it, but what Standish, you asked a little bit about what was surprising. I followed Kirkwood since we purchased Kirkwood in 2012. I remember watching the videos from Coop online, and there was just a fascination with this resort. We hadn't purchased, we bought North Star, but we hadn't had acquisitions in several years, and there was something that was a draw about this. And one of my pleasant surprises is the sort of shared passion that our employees and the community and our guests have for this mountain. There's pockets of that at each one of our other resorts, but I think the intensity of that and just how broad that is very unique, which is awesome. I think for me that's a great starting point. As I've met with a few community members here over the holidays and gotten feedback. We're always looking for opportunities to improve, and even when there's been some challenging moments, I know that feedback has been centered on how do we get better, because people care about this place. So that's my commitment that we've got a really strong core within our senior team, and we've had some turnover. So the mix of folks coming in because others have gotten opportunities within the company, I think is a good sort of launching point for us to take the great work that especially Doug and Tom have done recently and move that forward for the team. So that's sort of where our focus is. We have the last piece of that puzzle starting here in a month or so, and then really trying to figure out how we continue to have our senior team as well as myself involved in the community and some of the work that is being done here, especially to drive some of the economic development. So that's my commitment, is to help us be partners in that. Especially in the housing world, that the partnership with our company and our resort with the different entities that are in those communities has been critical to the success. And I think nobody is going to have the top priorities always be the same all the time, yet directionally and everybody, there's alignment on what we're trying to achieve. That's no different here. So commitment to work with this group and the rest of the community to have us drive the business forward, keep Kirkwood, what's special about it, and how do we make it even better.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions, Matt?
I have 3.
Sure.
As long as you're here. They're the playground renewables and economic development. So I just want to mention that, so since you have a 6-year-old,
Yes.
it could be even more relevant. We need to rebuild the playground, and we're looking for Vail to make sure that we have the land rights to do it, and that's been very slow going. So I'm hoping that now that you're here that we can be decisive on that. We have a community meeting next week.
Yep.
On it, and we'll raise the money to build it and operate it, but we need your help to know that there's a place we can put it. So I just want to mention that's a priority.
Certainly.
And something that has zero cost. The second is, as a community, we're moving to 100% renewables, and a number of our families are doing that, but we haven't yet figured out whether Vail's just going to do that on their own or whether there's any cost-effective way that we can add value to that, and it's generally been silence on that issue. So we'd just like to know, you want to cooperate on that, you want us just to go our own way, in particular with propane, right? I mean, that's things, but, and whatever the most cost-effective for you is fine, but we just want to know where you want to tie in. And then the last thing is economic development. I mean, the community spent $50-something million upgrading the utilities here, which only made sense if there's going to be growth. Otherwise, all we did was raise our costs. With modest growth, and we ended up being less expensive than where we were. But that hasn't happened first because of the recession, but that's over with. There's no interest, but there's been no really sign from Vail whether they want to do anything except maintenance here. So getting some indication of where you want to end up would be great. And I know the limitations of what you work with, but silence is what we've mostly heard on that issue to date, unless someone wants to correct me.
No, I think that's...
Yeah. So those are, I guess, those are the three things I'd like to just bring to your attention.
Okay. No, I appreciate that, and definitely on the playground, that's something I'm committed to partner on. On the renewables, we can get our team that's working on our commitment to zero. That's an area where we obviously have a line of priorities, so it'd be silly for us not to work together on that and see if we can partner. And then the economic development, I saw Bruce's email, and we're committed to being a part of those committees to drive that. I think from a resort standpoint, I've already been in talks with Gary Dirk and Nate Whaley about how can we support Tlac hospitality on Kirkwood Station, and then what are those other things that we can do to help support that level of economic development. And I'm digging into, from a resort standpoint, some of the remaining infrastructure that needs to be upgraded. We've had talks about the backside power line and some things. That
and while you're doing it, you could upgrade the chair. That would be
yes.
a nice thought.
First things first, I got to get the power line approved. We have been doing survey work on that with the Forest Service and preparation for that. So that's a high priority for me. I mean, I want to see this place successful, and with that, it's going to take some investment, but that's on our team to sort of make the case for that internally.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yes.
Good try.
I'd like to add something that your two predecessors were keen to do, but that did not happen. It's basically summer activities. Both of Doug and Tom have advocated to have stronger activities in Kirkwood during the summer, but we just saw the opposite. So the resort shut down the climbing wall, and the lift for the bike is no longer operating. The Kirkwood Inn is closed for extended period of time, and I'm forgetting one more thing. Basically, everything the zip line is not operational, so maybe that's an activity that you should look into to basically try to bring up activities in the summer, music camp or whatever else. I know you do weddings, but this is a bit limited at this stage, and I know both Tom and Doug said that it was a priority for them, but we just saw the opposite. So I'm hoping, as I said, we come for the snow, we stay for the summer. And it is actually a fantastic area, and I think the people who develop the station understand that, because they really have a lot of gear up for summer activities. So I really hope this is also part of your to-do list.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Tom and I did a little debrief on the summer plan, and I realized we shut down the lift, not the optimal experience from a biking standpoint. I think we've got a group that we're going to task with, how do we reimagine summer, and from a trail standpoint, do we bring back horseback riding? We've been having conversations with the Forest Service about that. A couple of those items, the zip line and the wall, there are some, structural issues with those. We can't, we actually can't operate those, but my point is we've been already having conversations on that. Our new ski and ride school director will work with Ricky Newberry and actually Eric Tiffany as well, our so Mountain Ops and F&B to figure out what our summer plan is. The come for the winter, stay for the summer is how I got hooked into Colorado and the mountains in the first place, and definitely a priority for us. When it happens, we'll have to play it out, but we're not going to wait for some huge investment. Our approach will be how do we do it a little bit grassroots and try to build it instead of waiting to have some big pitch. So there's been conversations already with Tamba about some trails. So we're trying to figure out what can we get started on, sooner and just start to build from there versus trying to do a huge pitch similar to Epic Discovery at Heavenly and some of the other resorts.
Other comments?
I just have two, I guess. One related to the our ability to, over time, reduce rates, and that is, please stay open to the end of April. It really makes the most sense here. We almost always have a lot of snow towards the end of April, and to have it closed down the first weekend or second weekend of April is frustrating for the community, but also, particularly for people who live here or have homes here. And it takes away, it probably reduces our electric sales by 50 to 100,000. So it's important. It's important to us. So last winter was great that it stayed open a little longer. But the other is, I think one of the key things for Vail's contribution to this community would be to have a general manager who actually stays around. It's been a revolving door, and we just get to know a general manager. We just start to have some confidence that maybe the general manager has some real commitment, not just a corporate commitment, but a real commitment, and then the person leaves. And so you're the fourth one in 6 or 7 years, I guess. And so please stick around.
I appreciate that. I've gotten that from one of our, some of our staff. So certainly appreciate the question. I think that's my plan. I don't know how long. I would be perfectly happy if we stay here forever. My wife and I, we bought a house locally. We're committed here.
Where are you?
We're living down in Myers, so we want to be close to this end and be able to get up into the mountains quickly, winter and summer. I've experienced that from time in Colorado and the impact that has not just on our employees, but the community and those relationships. So certainly, understand the challenge that's been, and I think structurally, our growth the last couple of years has sort of been a little bit to the extreme, and it created opportunities for both Doug and Tom most recently. But I think and then we had some structural changes at the top. So I think right now the way that we are regionally, I think my peers and I, who are all in their first or second year at their particular resorts here in the Western region, share that same desire. And I think the way we're set up now from a succession standpoint, I think lends itself to having longer tenures in these roles. I mean, I will share, when I was living in the mountains and working in HR, I was questioned, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to move to Broomfield? Do you want to grow your career? And I said, yes, and I want to live in the mountains. And so I'm not afraid to sort of push back. I'm mindful of moving my family around, my boys. It was a decision I weighed. Do I want to move them, especially at these ages, if it's only going to get tougher here? So all those are things I'm thinking about, and my desire is to be here and see success and see progress. Definitely not just to stop.
Right. Well, that's good to know. So one other thing, two things actually, but they're related. One is, in the past, it's been very useful for our general manager and person in your position to meet every couple of weeks just for conversation to see what the day-to-day issues are, catch up with each other and so on. I think it's been a good way of connecting both organizations. And the other is we have a very important committee structure. I mean, to us, it's very important. Every committee, each of 4 committees has up to 5 community members. 2 of the key ones have Vail representatives. That's finance and planning. They're really key committees. Brian Biggs is on the planning, and Paul is on finance. But they often aren't actually there. We have 1 committee meeting a month for each committee. If you could encourage them to attend and participate, I think it would make those committees that much stronger. Because the planning, for example, deals with, housing. That was one of your areas, employee housing, for example. Deals with how we expand, if we expand, the scope of services that we provide. It just deals with longer range issues, and of course finance, is core to us. So that would be great if you could encourage them to attend.
And the other area in planning is parking. At times that's the limitation for that, and so how can we reduce the amount of land used for snow storage, since we both share those operations? Is there a more efficient land configuration that would allow more parking in those extreme? That's an example of what's covered in planning also.
Okay. Yeah, I've been having discussions with the developer about sort of our next step with that in terms of the replacement parking that they have, and as soon as we get that to a place, definitely want to come to the team and make sure that this makes sense for all of us, and in terms of some of the options we're looking at.
Anything else? Standish, you've been unusually quiet about this.
We figure that as an introduction.
You'll get to know Standish pretty well. Okay, if there's anything else then.
Good position.
Thank you, Matt, for coming.
Thank you.
Enjoy taking your voice to the gents.
Absolutely. And if there's anything, in the interim outside of the regular meetings that anyone needs, feel free to reach out. Happy to get together as a group or one-on-one. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to item 8B. Kelly? Thank you. Welcome. Finances.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so we'll start with the balance sheet on page 12 of your packet. The only note I had on the balance sheet was, again, the note regarding the variance in operating cash being up from plan. And again, this is just due to timing of completion of projects and projects that were planned but didn't happen and things of that nature. So other than that, if there are any other questions on the balance sheet, moving on. On to the revenue account by fund. You'll notice G&A is at a negative, but that's always at a negative until the end of the year. So, and then the other fund that is at a negative is employee housing, but again, that was something we knew was going to happen with the purchase of the 2 condos. So, other than that, snow removal has come into a positive situation with the collection of contract revenues. Any questions on operating revenue, cash? Moving on then to the combined income statement. November revenues are down from plan by about $80,000, and again, the first 3 weeks of November were really warm. I mean, I had my windows open for until Thanksgiving. So, but year-to-date revenues through November were up from plan by $122,000, and year-to-date total operating is up from plan by $402,000. Moving on to
Kelly?
Yes?
On the total operating,
Mhm.
well, the operating expenses, do you expect that to get closer to budget because of these unfinished or unbilled projects?
Yes. And all the new stuff that's been happening at the wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately. Moving on to water on page 19 of your packet. You'll see a variance in operations and maintenance, and this was due to we're finally getting the invoices for the rate study that was happening in water and wastewater. But if you look at the year-to-date totals, you'll see we're still in plan for that. So it was just, when we expected for that project to happen and when it actually happened. So timing thing. Operating revenues year-to-date are up from plan by $11,000, and year-to-date total operating is up from plan by $66,000. But again, water and wastewater operate at a loss. So they're at a loss of $38,000 year-to-date. Moving on to wastewater, on page 20, operating revenues for wastewater year-to-date are up from plan by $9,300. And again, that same variance in operations and maintenance due to the rate study. And year-to-date total operating is up from plan by $130,000, but still operating at a loss of $88,000. Moving on to electric on page 22. Year-to-date revenues are up from plan by $42,000, but again, you can see that in November, the biggest hit we took was in residential because of the warm temperatures. And total operating for electric is up from plan by $117,000. Moving on to propane on page 25. Operating revenues year-to-date for propane are down from plan by $29,000. But you can see because we weren't buying as much propane, our cost of goods is also better than planned. So they kind of cancel each other out because of the fact that we're not buying as much propane because we're not selling as much. So total operating for propane is up from plan by $32,000. And that's all I have on income statements. Are there any questions? All right. I did put in, just as for informational purposes, our interest rate confirmation notice from our Russ loan that we rolled over. And we did, our interest rate was at 2.021. So.
Low.
Which is less than our LAIF interest earned by a hundredth.
Big arbitrage coming up.
November EBITDA is down from plan by $13,000, but year to date we are better than planned by $433,000. Moving on to December preliminaries. These are actual revenues, and you can see that we were down from plan by $116,000. $108,000 of that was in electric, and it's mainly due to the fact that there was no snowmaking. We, Mother Nature, she helped. There was, just no snowmaking at all. So, but year to date, we are still up from plan by $6,000. Any questions on December preliminaries?
Last year, did the resort continue to make snow into January? I can't remember.
They made snow. They took out all the compressors in November, Rick, and then they brought them all back in January.
Last year.
Yeah. So they had them twice. But it
so
wasn't
we may
continued.
suffer in comparison in January as well.
Yes.
That was kind of an anomaly, though. Bringing them back in January, that was something that had never happened before.
Yeah.
So,
well, hopefully our 5-year averaging and the budgeting kind of
right.
mitigates that.
fact that commercial has reduced its activities in 2019 compared to 2018 if you look at actually at revenue from that sector, which is underscoring what we were saying, that we are not growing.
Okay, moving on to cash flow on page 33 of your packet. Total operating for December ended at 2.3 million, which is 1.2 million more than budget. But again, as we've discussed, it's just due to timing and completion of projects, things of that nature. And you also notice that we did transfer $500,000 from the LAIF back into operating, and that will be moving back. On here I had it moving back in January, but we've decided to wait until February 1st to move that money back. And it was just timing of when we had received payments and things like that, and when we had to pay our Russ loan payment. So we just wanted to make sure we had enough in operating cash to cover that payment when it came out.
Our low point is not as bad as it was a month ago. Or is that because we rolled over the loan and had a? It seems to me that the December 23 was our low point.
It moved though.
It is still 23.
Is it still? I thought it moved.
But it's
to
not
20.
as bad, is it, as it
moved
was?
from 20 to 23.
Oh, okay. I think it's just timing and the way cash is flowing through.
Well, it seems to me that December of 23 was like well below $1 million, and I was just wondering if that was because we rolled over that loan and with a different term than was anticipated.
The rollover of the loan was always built into the cash flow.
But I thought
so,
maybe the term. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's better than it was. It
Yeah.
seems. Okay.
So Kelly, on that leaf drawdown or transfer, I see it in the balance, but it's not in the stuff above the balance. Is that correct? Why isn't it in the stuff above the balance?
It is. There's a transfer to LAIF. Oh, you mean why isn't it in December?
Yeah.
Because we hadn't planned to do that, and so the December numbers I don't update from actuals, but you can see the plan to put it back is in January, but we've decided to move that to February. So, and it was after I had already completed the cash flow. So, we hadn't planned to do it. That's why it wasn't in the cash flow to begin with. And those are just plugged numbers from what the actuals are there at the bottom.
Okay, and this says you're planning to put $750,000 in the leaf.
Right, and that was we had planned to originally move cash to the reserve, but because we're making more interest in the LAIF, we've decided to transfer cash to the LAIF because why not?
Right.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'm sorry, I do have one.
Sure.
I'm expecting to get a lot of questions about our expenses in parks and recreation. Would it be possible to just see, would it be easy for you to produce a 12-month report on it? I'm assuming that there's the G&L allocation is just identical every month?
Well, yeah.
Approximately.
Yeah.
So that's like $1,300. And then the rest
More
would
than that. It's
what?
like-
Well, G&A allocation is $1,249 this month.
Oh. Yeah, it just depends on what comes through G&A. So that
Right.
that number can be higher based on what comes through G&A.
Okay. And then there are some months where there's extra labor charge. Is that what happens?
Well, if
I
people
never
are,
paid that much attention to
Yeah.
it, and I now have a feeling that I need to.
if because you've been working in parks, so we're coding more hours to parks.
Okay.
Generally, I only budget for labor hours in parks in the summertime when we're putting the playground up and taking it down. So, but because we're now, focusing on that, you're going to see some more labor hours in parks.
Okay. So if we say that 5 months of the year was $7,500, is that a good average for GNA? That's about $1,500 a month.
Yeah, so what's in the budget right now for the budget that is adopted varies between $1,200 and $1,500. The total GNA allocation in the budget is just shy of $16,000.
Okay.
Board of Director allocation is $1,500.
And then there's about $3,000 or $4,000 in labor.
Right.
There is
But I
right
can
now
definitely-
labor plus benefits is about $7,200, and then depreciation and outside supplies is about $2,300 per the budget.
Okay.
I can definitely get you something.
Print out
though,
that
for
section of the
total-
budget form.
Yeah. Mhm.
We're going to be asked, and we
Sure.
just have so many nice things.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Would that be helpful to have the budget detail out as well as the actuals for you, Bob?
Yeah, I think so, and I know I could find it all if I take a page from everything, but if it's easy for you to pull
It's
it,
It's
I
very
just pulled
easy,
up the one
yeah.
page, so we'll get them
then that would be great.
cut down.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to see it too.
Yeah,
Please.
so you are on the Parks Committee.
The reason I mention is I'm in charge of answering the question and answer,
Uh-huh.
and one of the questions is, why is it so expensive?
Understood.
And the others are, why is it so cheap? Cut from both.
Finally, the budget variance. Again, there was the only update to the budget variances were snow removal salaries and benefits through November 30th. I expect to be adding some things to this. Okay,
Thank you, Kelly.
thank you.
Snow removal, how are we doing compared to budget with half-baked snow season we have now? Snow removal, I'm trying to see it here.
It's page 24.
Thank you.
We're total operating for snow removal currently is right at budget. We're $89 ahead. But that's just mainly due to the fact that we've had less operations and maintenance expenses through November. But we all know what happens in February or January and February, so we'll probably that'll change. It won't be so on budget.
I think we budgeted for a reasonably large snow year, so hopefully we are
Yeah.
on budget.
We artificially cut the labor to the 320 number. We're going to blow by that for seasonals.
Hmm.
As I reported 3 months ago, no one would come for a part-time job.
Yeah, right.
Oh, I see.
So we're going to blow right through that. Although we've been happy when they've asked to take some time off without pay. We've accommodated that
Yeah.
readily.
Okay.
We're sort of at that point of year where, the fall and summer are over and the real action's starting.
Yeah. I'd rather have them and not need them than need them and not have them,
Well, we
AKA
tried.
last year.
Yeah, we tried that, yeah. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Randy? We go on to item 8C, performance reporting and aquifer levels.
Good morning.
Hi, Randy.
Good morning, Brandy.
So we had a good month in November for our utilities. Starting with electric, we had no powerhouse run. We just purchased off the grid for 969,000 kilowatt hours. Of that, we had a 12% or 116,000 kilowatt hour loss, putting us at 12% for the year, which is what our goal is. So we're moving along reasonably well in electric. Propane continues to be negative. We did have a cold December, so we purchased 3.5 million cubic feet into the tanks. We ended up with a negative loss of 164,000 cubic feet, or negative 5%. I did take a look at Frank's question for last month, which is how many cubic feet are in a tank rather than gallons. And the answer is that depends. I did it on a general range of temperatures because it's a temperature and pressure compensated calculation. So it's somewhere between 1.4 and 1.6 million cubic feet in the tanks if we're full. And that depends on how much liquid is in the tanks. So I expect that propane is going to continue to be confusing, but relatively close to zero. Any questions on that before I move on?
Is that cubic feet of gas?
Cubic feet of gas, yes. So the conversion is that we purchase in gallons and we
Sure.
measure in gallons, but then we sell in cubic feet on a temperature pressure compensated basis. All right, so we move on to water and wastewater. Production in water from our wells was 1.7 million gallons. We had an 11% loss, so 181,000 gallons. That brings us to 16% loss for the year, which is pretty close to our 15% goal. With continued high use through the ski season, I expect that'll come down to goal. And then lastly, wastewater, it remained pretty steady the last month. We measured 1.7 million gallons coming into the plant. We had an unidentified usage of 281,000 gallons, and that is extra water that's coming in to be treated at the plant that did not run through water meters. So that's a 16% loss in that department, bringing us to 18% for the year. This is tracking along better than we have seen in the past in wastewater, but we generally see our high impacts in spring melt, so we're going to wait and see how that goes. Other than that, everything seems to be tracking along pretty good.
I would note in December for water, there was a water line break at the Kirkwood Inn. So that was broken before the meter, so it would not have been captured. So that added to our unidentified losses. They filled their trench pretty well with water.
Absolutely, thank you.
On the manhole refitting project, how many percent are we done now?
Couldn't tell you the percent, but we've done just shy of probably about 28.
That's right.
28 so far, and they've almost been exclusively in the meadow. We will be replacing the one, if you've seen the candlestick out by Caples View in the middle of the road, Vail hit that. So we will be replacing that with a Pam-Tite as well. So once we had to order, we didn't have any on the shelf. So when that comes in, and when it's conducive and not going to impact operations, we'll get that replaced as well.
So do you expect some of this loss that we have could still come from the refitted manholes?
Of course. I mean, so basically, there's these are the things that can cause I&I, which is infiltration and inflow. It can be manhole interface. It can be the manhole lid itself, so leakage coming down through the top, leakage coming through the side of the manhole. It can be an offset pipe. So if a collection pipe is offset, the joint separated. It can be a rolled gasket in a pipe, and it can be a cracked or damaged pipe. Those are your main sources of inflow and infiltration. One thing that we have seen some problems on once we get done with the manhole project. The next thing we're going to be looking at is root intrusion. There's a lot of trees built right over the top of our lines, and they are destroying our lines. And so we're going to identify the most heinous culprits and then work with the HOAs to notify them, then work through TriTac to get their permission to remove the trees and the property owners, of course, as well. But for example, there's quite a few that we've identified on Hawkweed that will need to be dealt with. And so we'll identify them, talk to the property owner, talk to KMA, talk to TriTac, hopefully get approval from all three and remove the culprits that are damaging the pipes. But that causes inflow and infiltration as well. Our easements have never been maintained in all these years since EID had them. No one's maintained the easement. And so in some cases we have 60, 80 foot tall trees right on top of our line with their roots doing really well, sucking up that sewer water, which is full of nitrates, which they love.
A good recycling system, but
Yeah, new systems are much more tight that you don't have these issues generally. You'll see, especially when you start using better quality pipe, but old AC collection lines with push-on joints, the old style Schedule 40 or Schedule 8, well, they didn't use Schedule 80 anywhere, EID. Those pipes just are easily intruded. But we'll be bringing that back to operations first, once Derek has identified those, our wastewater supervisor, and then we'll start the steps of talking to all the concerned parties.
so that brings the topic of how can we, because of the lifetime of our infrastructure for the sewage and the water line, certainly, and electrical, actually, and propane. So, since I'm now on the planning committee, I'd like to actually at some point be able to discuss with what are the plans to address basically the replacement of the
Right.
infrastructure over time.
Yeah, so we've talked about it a few times. Right now our priority is wastewater and then propane. That'll be our two priorities. Electric is relatively new and fine. And then water would be the next one, and then electric upgrades. Electric, we're staying on top of transformers. That's really our biggest issue. And some of the direct bury, which thankfully we don't own most of. It's mostly our customers, so we're also working with them to let them know, as well as Vail, who has a lot of direct bury lines that are going to fail, just like Base Camp did in the last 2 years, right around Christmas twice, unfortunately. So wastewater is our biggest focus because that's costing us money and could potentially do the biggest fines. Propane's the next one to replace all the laterals, just to get on top of that and redo the whole system so it's more resilient to issues such as NOIA. And so.
What's a lateral?
So basically, you have a distribution line, and then the line that goes to your house is a lateral. So we'd like to, for example, in propane, we have a lot of laterals that go up, the pipe comes up, and then it runs all the way around the house, 80 feet outside. It should come up, and the meter should be right there and protected, and we need to fix those things. So when we run the laterals, we can run it to where the meter is instead of...
And there's also some places where we don't have a turnoff valve.
Yes.
That's also part of the project. As part of that project, and Brandy and I have been kicking it around, is there will be a shutoff valve in the street, so theoretically it's much easier to get to because we should be plowing in the winter.
Right, because we've geocoded all the ones most of the ones we could find.
Which are not a whole...
Which is not all of them.
37%, I think, is that where we're at on... assuming that they exist on every one, which they don't.
They don't.
Oh, okay. I've never run the percentage.
Eric, does that imply that we own the laterals? I thought we did not own the laterals.
We don't.
But
it's...
So the plan to replace them, I mean, we shouldn't be discussing this right now, it's not on the agenda, but maybe that's a planning committee topic, just so we understand it,
Right.
at least. I mean, that is an important issue to us, obviously.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think we can move on to the aquifer levels.
Aquifer levels in your packet have remained, they're a little lower than we saw in November and December, remaining relatively steady for this time of year. And we did see an increase in daily influent flows at the wastewater treatment plant, which you'll be able to see on this sheet also on page 41 of your packet. Towards the end of the month, we were well over 100,000 gallons every day coming into the plant, whereas when we started the month, we were 19 or 20,000 gallons. So you can see that we've had a lot of valley occupancy, a lot of water being run through the tanks and through the valley.
At this point, I mean, there used to be, long ago, there was a red flag point about aquifer levels. I have a sense we don't really know when the red flag should go up. Do we? Because we don't understand.
I think our operators know.
Yeah,
when they get nervous, they'll let us know when they're getting nervous about the levels. Yeah, they absolutely know.
Okay. Thank you, Brandy. Okay, we'll go on to item D, which is committee appointments and logistics. Let's see. So last month, of course, we determined the board members. And so this month, we want to make official the appointment of our community members. And thank you to all the chairs for setting times, regular times, and so on. So here's the rundown as I understand it at this point. So the Operations Committee, the community members are Carolyn Scott, Howard Hoffman, and then new members Gene Reuter, Christian Bastul, and Frank Dixon. And the meeting time is the fourth Wednesday, 2 p.m. So that's operations. The planning, Nate Whaley and Brian Bigley returning. We have one new member. Well, one member has left. Cheryl Stern has moved over to communications. And the new member is John Schroeder he's actually an East Meadows board member right now. He's a very smart guy and very interested in the planning topics. So I think he'll be a really good contribution. So we have two possible slots open for planning. I am in the process of trying to recruit a person. I don't know if she will do it or not, but it would be good to flesh out that committee a little bit if there's anyone that particularly in my view, from the KMA side, who might be interested in joining the planning committee.
Yeah, I'll be asking.
Finance, Mark Duvall, Jack Longinati, Paul Futtenhauer, and Nancy Trevette are the returning members.
Mark withdrew.
Mark has withdrawn, so we don't have Mark anymore because of this meeting time, right? So we have two openings on the finance committee. We lost Alan Sapp, which I think is a big loss. I would love to somehow talk him back in. But anyway, we have two openings on finance if possible. Communications, Cheryl, and then Sandy Goldberg. And Sandy is a longtime homeowner in Kirkwood, has been involved with the spring festival, the summer festival and the auction work. And her role, she is the marketing and communications person for a substantial medical practice in the Central Valley, or I'm not sure it's Stockton or Lafayette area, but she would very much like to join the communications committee. So I would like to appoint Sandy's. So those are and the planning committee meets fourth Friday at 2 p.m. Finance the Tuesday prior to the board meeting, 10 a.m. Communications the third Monday, 10:30 a.m. And then personnel does not have any community members, although some ad hoc efforts could have community members. But that's the third Monday at 9:30 a.m. So those are the standing committees. I'll get to the other committees pretty soon. But so if that sounds good, I'd like a motion to approve these appointments.
So moved.
Is a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And again, I encourage recruiting people who think would be very good for each of these particular specialty areas. And by the way, when I look for people, I look for people who are not only can be committed to the committee, but who might also bring some skepticism. We need different kinds of thinking for these things, and people who will not just say yes, yes, yes. Okay. The other committees that we have, groups. I'm not sure they're committee. Well, there's a summer festival, and Rick, I guess we're leaving that to you to assemble the community members for that, and that's starting this month.
We've had one meeting already. Unfortunately, no one attended, but we did get emails from Carolyn Scott. It'll be Jessica, myself, Carolyn Scott,
Karen Higgins.
and Karen Higgins have all expressed interest to stay on this committee, and then we're soliciting for other committee members who'd like to help participate.
And Malene Smith as well. I talked to her on the phone the other day.
Who?
Malene Smith.
Oh, Malene, oh, good.
Oh, that's good. Is Cheryl out now in that, or is she?
Cheryl is attending the meetings, however, she's not, she wants to step aside because she wants to focus on the playground committee. Or so-
Got it. And she's, of course, on communications.
Still helping us out, though, but
That's the summer festival. The economic development. I know in the past, Bob and Standish have expressed. Well, Bob started it, and Standish has also expressed a lot of support for it. It would be good to have at least one, if not two, board members joining Eric. Again, on this group, I'm afraid I'm just foggy on what the Economic Development Group is doing now, and I'm hoping Bruce can come in maybe next on February 1st meeting
You said possibly.
to give us a briefing. But do we want to? Are there any volunteers to be on the Economic Development? It's not a committee. It's a group that meets twice a year. But I think that they're creating a committee and subcommittee structure. Bruce is. I don't know if that will have legs or not, but that's the intent. Volunteers? for
I'd
that?
be interested.
Okay. Bob and Standish, thank you.
We could alternate or whatever.
Okay.
Whatever works.
We'll let Bruce know that then, please. And then finally, the playground committee, and that's the two of you again?
Yes.
And who are the community members?
Cheryl and Stern and Ann O'Grady.
And then we have several others that said
Have
they were
expressed
interested in
interest.
joining from the survey.
No, not including, we had 9, because you were.
Somehow I got listed twice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'll attend both.
the double count check.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, particularly Bob and Standish for doing these things. I did want to take a moment, since we're on committees, to let you know some topics that I've been thinking about over the past months. And since we're kicking off a new calendar year, not a new fiscal year, I just thought I would run through them quickly. And these are not necessary. Some of these aren't our goals, and I don't mean that these should override the goals that we have, but I think that they're important topics. I'll just go through them by committee. Finance, of course, the big deal will be at some point soon the RUS financing for the wastewater treatment plant. And we're still struggling a bit with the fire department funding. I'm hoping to have a conversation with Terry at some point soon about that again. For the communications, of course, we need to modify the charter to include the customer survey. I don't think it does right now officially. There's a snow removal performance reporting and metrics. There's a schedule for drafting the customer survey. There's the rec and offsets opportunity every October for voluntary participation. Of course, the playground survey results. And then one that's, I think, going to be particularly difficult, but I think over time it's going to be important. Probably not immediately by any means. But as more people, and particularly with the California state law now in place that requires solar panels on all new, or many new buildings, there are exceptions. There's an exception process. I think it's important that people understand what the impact of solar panels are on the PUD, so that it goes into their decision-making process. Every time people are generating their own energy means less energy coming up over our line, meaning less revenues, meaning less ability to reduce rates. The fact that we do, for those who do it for the purpose of the environment, carbon and so on, we do have the opportunity to be 100% through the REC process And that is a true, it's not just an offset, it's a true thing. But anyway, I think it's an important topic to communicate at some point and over time. The operations, again, snow removal report, performance reporting, both committees wanted to be involved with that. I think this really understanding the schedule for the wastewater treatment plant improvements, and are the dollars shown in the capital plan still the plan, and so on. And then the playground reconstruction, depending on the survey results and funding and what the committee comes up with. There are a couple of topics for personnel. One has to do with whether or not to do 360-degree reviews of management, and the other has to do with a fee for administering dental and vision insurance for retired folks, in which case right now we only have 2 people. Planning actually is my longest list, Bertrand and Peter. Of course, just modify the charter just to take the survey out. But I think it's important that this committee, through the staff, track the Alpine County excise tax possibility. I don't know where that stands. Not because it affects the district directly, but it would affect, I think, our need to propose a special tax to support the fire department if we choose to go that route at some point. It would be another tax upon another tax, which would make it more difficult for us to do that. Water, again, this is approximately a third priority after wastewater and propane, but there is some new state regulations on providing a water efficiency planning report. There's some new regulations. I know that Eric has engaged an engineer to begin a hydrology study for the planning committee to track, and then something more immediate, and that's should we make solid waste service mandatory. By the way, I didn't understand this until I talked to Eric. I never realized that there was anything about solid waste that was voluntary, although I did know the resort had a different supplier or service provider. The clarification on that is that it's voluntary at an HOA level, but once an HOA opts in, then the whole entire HOA does it. That's the way the ordinance was set up in 1998. And so the question is, should we make it mandatory? All HOAs are part of it already. It's just the resort that is not. But as you
And it's mandatory for a single family?
if the HOA,
The HOA,
Yeah.
it's a voluntary system.
Right.
The HOAs have to opt in, and no one has opted out since 2001.
Okay.
And that last one was Edelweiss? Thimblewood. Thimblewood was the last one to come in 2001.
and of course, we may not have a solid waste provider that we can afford if we don't make it mandatory. We don't know that, but that's a very real possibility. And then I think there's a variety of topics on having to do with solar, which I've already mentioned partly, but there's a future support of electric vehicles, for example, which we had tackled several years ago and then dropped because it seemed too difficult, I think. Bob has brought up a variety of times the opportunities that we may have in the near future for electric storage, and that could solve some problems associated with solar. And also just understanding what the solar exceptions are in the state law, just so we understand those things about panels on new buildings. So those are some topics that have been on my mind.
Heat pumps, yeah, I was going to say.
Oh, yeah, heat pumps I thought was already in the topics. I mean, I haven't gone
I
haven't gone over
okay.
goals. I mean, this is not. This is in addition to goals. Yeah. No, the heat pump. There is a final study on that, a final report on that, which the planning committee should obviously.
It's almost final, yeah.
Almost final.
Yeah.
Whether
It's on the next planning agenda.
Whether indicate its feasibility or not, we'll let you guys tackle with that, struggle with that.
It'd be nice to avoid expanding propane,
Yes.
if we could.
Absolutely.
Okay. If anyone else has other topics that you'd like to bring
I'd
up.
like to throw at least a study of the parameters about having a school back in Kirkwood. I think it's a kind of a chicken and egg situation for the development. I mean, I'm aware of several young couples that finally settle in Truckee instead of Kirkwood because there is no school. And so I think at some point we need to start thinking about how we can bring a school back in the community.
If we could get Ann Floor back because of that would be
That
great.
she's one of the person I'm thinking of. But not the only one.
Yeah. And I mean, all these topics, I don't mean to say that these should take priority over goals. I don't mean that the staff should take up every one of these immediately by any means either. You know, the staff, the biggest priority in this community right now, I think, our two priorities are wastewater treatment plant, the health of that plant, and rates. So the rate study and so on. Those take priority over, in my view, everything.
The way to address the rate issue is to actually restart the development of the valley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what planning should aim for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Thank you for that conversation. We'll move on to item E, legislative visits and topics. Eric, do you want to?
Just briefly, there's been a few emails that have gone out to the board on this last year. And one of the goals is to become more involved legislatively on behalf of the district. So to that end, I've identified 3 legislative days through 3 of the organizations to which the district belongs. The first one is the CMUA Capital Day. Eric and I will be attending that. We've reached out to Assemblyman Bigelow and Borgia's office, as they are our Assemblyman and Senator respectively.
Eric and Terry, is Brian Dahl are also our Assemblyman?
Our state senator.
I mean state senator?
Yes.
So it's interesting. I'm becoming educated in this.
Yeah.
So Brian Dahl is our state senator, District 1, and Alpine County is the southernmost piece of District 1. Amador County is part of District 8, and they're the northernmost. And we're right at the southernmost and the northernmost. And
But the census is coming, so we could, everything could just change.
it could change.
Yeah.
But what's
And it
interesting
will.
for us is Assemblyman Bigelow. No, excuse me. Yeah, Mr. Bigelow is,
Represents all.
and he's way south. I mean, his residence is south. He probably doesn't even know Kirkwood exists.
Oh, no, he does.
Yes,
Oh, he
he's
does.
very well.
He's very well versed in.
Okay,
Very.
that's good
He's-
news.
he's-
His staff has been
yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah, I guess my point is that when I look up each of these people, they don't live anywhere close to here.
His
That's what I'm
district-
saying.
His district rep lives in Amador County
Yeah.
Okay,
and has for many years.
okay.
And he's been district rep for every predecessor to
Forever.
this from Gaines. Yeah, Dana Jorgensen is a
Yeah.
great guy.
From
That's who we're
Cox,
working
too.
through because I have a personal relationship with
Yeah,
him.
me
Our
too.
kids have gone to school for, I mean, his kids are the same age as mine, so I've known him for 15 years.
Great.
So and that's who we're working through. And we also put chains on his car for him when he didn't know how to do them when he came to Kirkwood. So he owes us a little bit. So.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy.
Okay, well, as you can see, I'm ignorant about these things, and this is why I'm actually quite eager to go to this day and learn more. And I think it's a great opportunity, and I thank Eric for bringing this up. But go ahead, Eric. That was the first one.
Oh, and I will add Senator Dahl to
Dolly.
Dolly.
Yeah.
I'll look that up before I type it into my notes to our list. And
It's
then,
not a silent E at the end.
and so the next one that comes up after that is Aqua, which will be in March. So I plan on attending that. I'd be happy to have a board member attend with me on that one as well. And to whom we would visit, I don't know. I would imagine at some point legislation is going to start coming out that's going to be relevant to the district. So perhaps we visit committee chairs that are in charge of that particular bit of legislation, whether it's all the stuff that's coming down with the PSPSs and the electric side, although it marginally affects us because they're focused almost entirely on the CPUC, which doesn't affect us, or whether it's the new, the new water requirements that they're pushing down in all the districts, such as the shut-off thing that we now have to go through, which is a 6-page notice to shut someone off. So we may want to juggle up who we meet with. And then the third one is the CSDA. legislative visit in May. Rick will be attending that, and again, a board member that'd be willing to go to that as well. And each of these have generally have a morning session where the respective organizations will talk about the issues that are pertinent to the organization. So Aqua will talk about water and wastewater. CMUA will talk about everything, and CSDA will be a little more focused on special district side. And then also, right after that, we go and meet with our legislators, whoever we want to visit with. And we don't have to go meet with the legislators afterwards. Some will be at these various luncheons, and some will be actually speaking. So I just saw the Aqua agenda, so I know that there will be some assemblymen and senators at that speaking as well, as well as regulators. So I'd be looking for volunteers. You don't have to answer today, but please be thinking about it. Appreciate Eric stepping up for the first one. Although I've been to these before, it's always nice to have someone to go with, and it's also good to have an elected talk to an elected, quite frankly.
Suggestion I would add to this is we're more likely to be affected by regulators than legislation. And so if you're in Sacramento, the opportunity to meet with the appropriate person at the Energy Commission, because they have staff there that could be, that might end up being quite helpful to us and things that we're trying to accomplish. And so meeting with the energy commissioners, because they're all in Sacramento, they're all there. It's 3-block walk from the Capitol. So you might want to think about that, or maybe I can help.
That would be great.
I know most of them. So
good. That would be great. Yeah. CARB's another one we've talked about meeting with in the past.
Yeah, that one's a little bit more indirect, but the Energy Commission is right in our wheelhouse, and so there's a lot of things, a lot of programs that they are in charge of, for which we might receive money or regulatory clarifications or rule makings that we would like to see them.
Okay.
They're the sort of group you could ask questions as opposed to saying, "Here's what we need."
Speaking of what we need, are there any topics? I mean, Eric and I would like your input on any topics you may want us to bring up as we talk to people on January 27th, whether it's at the CEC or with the Mr. Bigelow, Dolly, or Borges. Standish wrote an email suggesting cell service. We try to tackle cell service again on Highway 88. I know Terry worked on that a little bit. That's one. Are there any other topics that you can think of that you'd like us specifically to address?
Wouldn't the cell service flow through the PUC? Isn't that
There
the
was a
most
meeting
immediate?
about 2.5 years ago. Terry went, Jeff's predecessor, Lynn Morgan went.
Yeah.
They met with Frank Bigelow and Jorgensen, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And there was a very junior member from Verizon there. And my request...
Sophia Garcia, yeah.
Right. And I don't think anything has happened in 2.5
No,
years.
Sophia is still there. She doesn't return my calls.
Well, if you want to get
Maybe she has bad
a
service.
telephone...
That's Verizon.
Yeah, but if you want to get a telecommunications company attention, you go through the PUC. That's the regulator. And if there is a public safety option, or if there is some angle.
No, there's definitely a public safety option. It's
Right.
pretty obvious.
Yeah, right. So,
Well, how does this work? Does the PUC respond to requests from a senator or an assemblyman? I mean, how
there's
important?
a love-hate relationship
Yeah.
there.
I mean, how important would it be for
They
us
can't
to,
be, no.
for example, to talk to Assemblyman Bigelow or one of the two senators and say, would you support us in having a discussion with the PUC on this topic, or would that not be helpful?
I guess I would first ask someone at the PUC what would be most helpful. I mean, I would want to do a little background first before knowing that. The legislature loves to do energy policy, and the PUC loves to not be interfered with. So that's the tension that usually exists there. It's
And
not
do
a
you,
bad one. but
and do you have a contact at the PUC that we could contact to ask that question?
Yeah, I'm going to meet with them on something else anyway. So.
Well, if you could
Yeah,
forward
that's
that
it.
to Eric
Yeah.
and me, that would be great, then we could at least make a contact.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? I don't know if, I mean, the thing is, I'm not sure that this is a forum. I guess we could just talk about what our concerns are. You know, I mean, I'm still concerned about inverse condemnation issue,
Yeah,
for example.
I would definitely.
And just the general topic of economic development.
I think they want to know what are the issues of being a small utility in California.
So I have a question. The Aqua meeting on March 12th, this is in Sacramento, Eric?
They're all in Sacramento. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all.
So
They
I
meet at
could
different places.
potentially join you on that, on March 12th for the water.
Thank you.
Be interested in hearing about future legislation that could impact for the planning. Yeah.
Great, excellent. Okay, anything else on this topic?
No volunteers for me.
Not yet. May's way out there. Let's go on to item F. This is Resolution 20-02, nominating General Manager Christensen as member. Is this member or board member?
It would be a board member to Region 3.
Board member of the Association of, Aqua, Region 3. Eric, do you want to tackle this?
Sure, briefly. Just, again, going back to goals, one of the things to get more involved. And there is an opening on the Aqua board. It's a good opportunity for Kirkwood to get some representation, especially since we're not really part of the Milk River. We don't have surface water treatment. We're all wells here, so it's really not. But that'd be another one, or mountain counties, but they're all focused on rivers predominantly. So this would be a good opportunity for us to get some representation and on the Aqua board, which is water and wastewater throughout California. Region 3 is generally the foothills. It meets once a year in Sacramento. The first meeting's already occurred. The first meeting will have occurred by the time they make the appointment, and then they request that you attend at least one of the two, preferably both, of the conferences, the spring and the fall. One's always north, one's always south, and then there's conference calls, etc., with regularity.
Time-wise, this is something you could handle pretty easily? I mean,
Yeah,
reasonably.
it's a relatively low time commitment aside from the conferences, but as Rick will attest, I was still managing the Kirkwood Inn project from San Diego at the last conference, so I was able to handle everything that was coming through.
Well, Eric asked me what I thought, and I said, well, I'm supportive of just about anything that contributes to both career development, but also to helping us network more into the agencies and the entities that can help us do anything from finding employees to finding grants, funding, help on issues that maybe we are unfamiliar with, and so on. So I would certainly be supportive of this as long as the time can be managed reasonably. Are there any other comments on this item?
I do actually. So I understand a bit better what is the issue here and what we are trying to get, because it was a bit obscure in the package on what was actually the benefit for KMPUD. So actually at this stage, I have actually concern on the way the resolution is written, because I cannot and I will not support any motion that is open-handed the way it's been written now here. So I'm referring to the section B, for example, that says that does hereby determine that the expense attendant to the service of Eric Christensen in the LCWA region 3 shall be borne by the KMPUD. This is contrary to what we try to do. I mean, typically we try to put a limit on things. I mean, if we are opening a bid, you are saying no more than specific amount. So I'm concerned here this is just open-handed, and I just cannot vote for that. That's a philosophical point for me. It would have to be rewritten in a way that has some limit.
Yeah, this is the resolution they require. They basically don't want, Aqua doesn't want to get a bill for me to go down to a meeting. Then this is the resolution they require. So in order for me to this resolution has to be passed, so that it would just be...
Let's be extreme and extravagant, and let's say they decide to go on a world tour to check water installation in the world. I don't want KMPUD to foot that bill.
Correct.
See what I mean? Yes.
And as I said earlier, my 3 requirements are a meeting at the beginning of the year, which I'll be missing, and the 2 conferences. Those are the required things I'm to attend, plus the telephone conferences. Those are the requirements.
Mm-hmm.
There's no world tour requirement.
Yeah, nevertheless, the motion is written in an open-handed way, and I have a problem
Right.
with that. Yeah.
Could we have a side motion of some sort? It's not part of this resolution that would just, well, at least an understanding of I mean, basically what you just said, that these are expenses to cover these
Right.
conferences and the
We
board
do budget
meeting.
for training, and the
Right.
conferences do fall into the training. The
Right.
meeting would be driving to Sacramento once a year.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that section, so I am firmly in contrast with Bertrand. I think it's written appropriately. I mean, it says the expenses attendant with the service of Eric Christensen, Aqua Region 3. It seems perfectly normal to me.
With the understanding that, I think that with the service meaning that it's the normal duties of a board member of this board, not the extra stuff that a world tour to study water in Israel or something like that.
Yeah, I don't expect that to happen.
No, I don't expect to, but it's just, I want limits. That's basically what
Yes,
yeah.
I think it's understood. I think that's understood.
I think your opportunity for the limits is in the budget. You just set the budget we set the training budget each year as part of that.
Yeah.
And the travels, we already reimburse employees for travel related to work. When Rick and Brandy go to Roseville, they get a hotel and they get mileage. It's just that's when we adopted the reimbursement policy for.
Any other comments? Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution? I think we all understand what you're saying, Bertrand, and I think Eric understands it too, obviously. Yeah, thank you.
So I would expect staff in the form of Kelly to alert us if there are any El Al trips to Tel Aviv. So I make the motion that we pass Resolution 2002.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
1.
Yes. On the ground, I describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Okay, move on to the general manager's report, which should be quite interesting.
It's not terribly interesting. Although I will say the Aqua Fall Conference, appreciate the board sending me to that. That was very helpful. Brought back a lot of things. I think I was feeding stuff to Eric while I was there, and I think maybe Bob, I think I sent you at least one thing from while I was there, just things that came up. I have downloaded all of the packets, which are on our server now. From all, even the ones I didn't attend, they have them all available. With the exception of one that was proprietary. Go figure. Did learn some very interesting stuff on the Brown Act. That I thought I knew the Brown Act really well, and I learned a very interesting nuance, which actually comes up today. So, so it's very, very interesting. It was a great conference, all in all. A lot of people that we deal with great regularity were down there. So, got to see them in a different context. They knew me from my prior iteration, and it was nice to see them there and reaffirm those contacts, which have been very helpful, especially in working on the shut-off thing that Kelly and I have been trying to deal with to get in compliance with the new SB on that, which is onerous at best. There was a good discussion on that, how you can shut people off, how you can't shut people off. So I learned a lot. I did a lot of the legal track because that was a little bit more interesting for me, and I did some of the regulation stuff that PSAS is. It's going to hammer every water district. Eventually, it will. We won't be hammered by it, but initially, it's a new testing protocol. The that has to do with industrial manufacturing byproducts. It has nothing to do with us. We don't have industry. We don't have manufacturing byproducts that are relevant to that. But the testing requirements that are going to be pushed onto us, even though we have it's completely a non-starter, we still have to comply with it. And it's very, very complicated. And I'll be sending our wastewater supervisor to at least one, if not more, seminars on that. So make sure we're fully in compliance.
Eric, can I just take this opportunity, because you said their packets were on the server and so on. Could I ask the communications committee to consider adding a place on our front page on the website for documents, important documents, just so that it's easy to get to a budget, packets, information packets like this, survey results, things that maybe people would be interested in. I mean, right now I wouldn't know where to search for those.
Just does tend to do that. As we have new stuff that comes up, it tends to be on the front of one of the three. Yeah, the latest news.
Yeah, but I mean,
we're going to make changes for managing the newsletter as an HTML document, and as part of that, I think there's an opportunity to try to do some cleanup.
Yeah, I'm looking at the website right now, site access more of the site with these links, my account, log out, community directory, participate, bill pay. I would love to see something saying important documents or something like that.
That's true, because they're kind of all over the website.
Right, exactly. Okay. Sorry for that interruption.
So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, thanks.
Caltrans has tentatively received approval from the next level above mid-management level. And they had a funny name for them, and I don't recall it off the top of my head, unfortunately. They called them the Others, I think is actually what they called them. They received tentative approval and should have written approval within 2 weeks that PG&E agrees to let us serve Caltrans Peddler Hill. So this has been, what year is this? 6 years coming? So we're working directly with Caltrans. District 10 Director McElhaney is very interested in accelerating this, and he's applying some political pressure. He's going up to the Director of Caltrans to apply pressure by the CPUC to PG&E to get this to happen, and they're finally getting some movement. So the next steps, just so the board's aware, and we'll be tracking this as we go, is once we have that letter, then we will have our attorney draft an amendment as per the interconnection agreement to allow for this one parcel to be served by us. Once that's done, then the next step is to go to El Dorado County LAFCO. I've talked to TriTac about it. They thought it was appropriate to bypass them because it was really not a TriTac issue. It was outside the service area. So we would go, the next step would be LAFCO. Caltrans will be responsible for preparing the appropriate CEQA document that will have to go to LAFCO as well. We will be the lead agency, but Caltrans will have to prepare it, or they will have to pay us to hire an environmental consultant to prepare it. I imagine it will be a negative declaration, possibly a mitigated neg deck, but I really doubt that. Once that goes through LAFCO, and if it's approved, then the next steps will be to enter into the design phase to do a step-down transformer and to serve Caltrans Peddler Hill.
The only thing I wonder about is, we had 100% support from the various environmental groups, and I wouldn't want to surprise them.
This has been discussed at TriTac.
But I don't remember the names of the various environmental groups that were part of it.
It was Foothill Conservancy, and Catherine Evett is fully aware of it. I've been talking to her on this quite a bit, and I think Sandy's even was at one of the meetings where it came up and has been talking with Catherine.
That was regarding Kirkwood Station.
Okay, yeah, but we also talked briefly about that.
Like the Sierra Club was also...
I know Foothill Conservancy was the lead one.
Yeah, okay.
And they are aware of it, and I've known Catherine Evett for 16 years, so she's aware, and we have been corresponding on it. So.
All right, well, taking diesel exhaust out of the forest is good.
One would think.
Yeah.
One would think.
Okay.
What is the cost, do you think, assuming we get permitting, to have that step-down transformer infrastructure in place?
Cost to Caltrans? There's no cost to the district.
I understand.
Between design and construction, they're going to be around $100,000, I imagine. And depending on how the environmental document goes, if they get any resistance from Foothill Conservancy, for example, it could be more.
And how many kilowatt hours do you think we would sell to them?
They gave us their load, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but we do have their annual generator runs. We could get you that information if you want. I think Brandy still has that.
Yeah.
And this is a money loser for them.
But they get state funding that they otherwise wouldn't get if they're not connected. Is that correct?
I don't know.
They get out from some Air Resource Board issues that they're
Right.
struggling statewide with.
Right.
Although they're not struggling in Amador Air District. I guess that wouldn't be Amador. That'd be El Dorado Air District, possibly. I wonder who that would be. I actually don't know the answer to that. But it's part of their
It's easier for them
statewide
to
goals
operate.
is to get off of all their diesel generation.
Yeah.
The wastewater package plant option. We were approached. We had a salesperson come out, and you know how salespeople are. They always like to overstate things a little bit. But they thought that the package plant estimate in Stantec's report was too high, so they approached us. Would we be interested? I said, well, if you can get an engineer to tell me that they have an option that might be feasible, we'd be willing to listen. So they teamed up with Loomis, which Michelle Gamble has now gone to, or she went to quite a while ago from RCI, and they will be making a presentation to the operations committee this month on what they think they might be able to do as a package plant option in lieu of doing all the upgrades and repairs to the wastewater treatment plant. So I'm in a holding pattern right now on the funding applications I've been working on with SRF and RUS just to see if this has any legs. We'll see. They thought they could come in $4 to $5 million. I'm skeptical of that, but maybe it's not $11 million. We'll see. It doesn't hurt to take one more listen at it and see if we can find a cheaper alternative, especially in light of the exorbitant costs we're going to have to incur to get wastewater fixed that have been deferred for all these years. So that's
is the theory of this, it's a brand new plant located somewhere and then you switch over to it?
correct. So the theory would be we tear down the old A-frame and go to a small batch reactor plant instead of a membrane bioreactor plant. I've always thought that was a really good option. I visited the very first one in the state, which is at a Indian casino outside of Red Bluff. It was the very first one in the state, and I forget the name of the casino. But it was a very small footprint, and they were dealing with some really intense issues, especially in terms of just the alcohol consumption and how they were having to deal with that in their wastewater plant. So it was really interesting. They were able to handle some real interesting loads. So, sorry, wastewater. I just talk about it like it's not anything. It's just as my old mentor used to say. It's just soupy water. So anyway, so we're working on that, and we'll see if that goes anywhere. If it looks like it has legs, then operations will probably make some recommendation back to the full board to see if we pursue that option instead. If not, then we'll go down the phased approach we have currently in the 218 rate study. We do have the phased approach. But we do have financing for that. The rate study the rate increases that were needed to support that just paid out of rates would be so exorbitant we couldn't handle it. So we're planning on financing the wastewater improvements as it is. So, and that's where that stands.
And right now, the study we had an estimate of around $4 million to upgrade the plant.
Yeah, I think it was 4.8. For everything we've spent the first three. Well, we haven't spent any money because they can't get us a proper invoice, but we've theoretically expended $300,000 on the roof.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions of Eric on this one? Frank?
So this alternative approach, is it just a one-for-one replacement in terms of capacity, or could they have additional capacity? And
It would be expandable, but it'd be a one-for-one.
okay, thanks.
Yeah, SBRs are really, for those that don't, SBRs are basically they're giant concrete basins, and they're nice square, and all you have to do is just build one right on the end. It's really easy. So.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to operations report. Rick?
Can I ask
Oh.
no, actually, that's okay. It's here. I can see it. Operation report.
So in pages 51 through 54, our staff reports from our wastewater superintendent, Derek Dornbrook. explaining some recent issues that we've had at the wastewater treatment plant, only because it's winter and it's always during the holidays. So the timing is just so consistent year after year. I'm not going to read his reports, but I'm going to highlight them, of course. Since the inception of the membrane system, we've had a series of issues with valves within the treatment plant. These valves are pneumatic. They're operated by an air compressor that we replaced recently for about $10,000. And what happens is the valves, which control the process of moving the water from the membrane basins to our final effluent basins, if they fail, drop offline, it takes the whole system down. We have 2 membrane trains, and usually one will go down, we can reset it, repair the valve, do mechanical changes and or programming changes to make it work. But over the last several years, these valves are failing much more frequently. This is valve CV117, for example. This is a picture from 2 years ago where it had failed, and we've become valve experts, or the treatment plant staff have become valve experts, replacing these different components. And you'll notice that this yellow wire, and I'll bring this up later, that's a pretty important component to the valve. It's basically the line that runs to the PLC, the brain of the system. And it's an issue that, again, like I said, I'll talk about in a few minutes. But starting on December 17th, we started having valve issues. We replaced valves, we reset them. They'd stay online for an hour or two. They drop off. So staff is constantly trying to chase down which valve it was. We have over 27 different valves in the system, and some of the valves are behind equipment and or 18 feet in the ceiling at the very top of the treatment plant. So it's been a bit of a challenge just to access the valves and maintain them. Once the valves started failing, we would mitigate them, and then next thing you know, valves seemed to be working fine, but the device net, the communications between the PLC and the valves were starting to act up. So we've had Tesco controls come out on numerous occasions since October, and we've just received the invoice as of yesterday. I don't think Eric even was aware of this, but it's an invoice for $14,000. But it's not a surprise because we've had several Tesco operators or control people come up and been on site for several hours helping us resolve the issues. On December 22nd, we again had another failure. We were able to put one train online, which will give us about 105 gallons of process a day flow, which was fine for the time being. With the second train being in a safe mode, our hope was to get through the holiday period and be able to, if we went over the 105,000 gallons, put the wastewater into reserve storage, the black tank or EQ2. But of course, 6 days later, on December 31st, the whole system went down again, and we were on scramble mode to, one, try to resolve the issue as quickly as possible, but two, try to pump water to our black tank to keep it. We have about 2 days or 3 days reserve in the black tank during winter busy times. Unfortunately, we couldn't move the water to the black tank because the system wouldn't let us do it. Long story short, there was a frozen pipe that was eliminating the quick and easy turn a switch and pump water to the black tank. So staff had to physically pull hoses and actually pump water from our EQ within the treatment plant into our reserve tanks. Long story short, we did not have a spill. We were able to manage water. We didn't overflow the basins. But on the 31st, New Year's Eve, or the 30th and the 31st, it was certainly a challenging time for staff. Again, Tesco Controls was called. We had to actually have them, with our staff assistants, go through each of the valves, tear them apart, check the communications, and we discovered that this yellow line, which is the main power supply, and also the ground, because of the age and the condition of the line, it was actually faulting within the system. So we're getting basically dirty power fluctuating through the different valves back to our PLC. We've managed that by changing some of the controls of the PLC and changing the lag time for on and offs for each valve. But there's certainly a problem that's within the system that we're going to have Tesco come out and troubleshoot each and every line. It's going to be probably time-consuming and probably very expensive. But again, this is just an example of the ongoing issues at the wastewater treatment plant that we always experience at the worst time of the year. But staff did an excellent job keeping up with it, and we'll continue to bring back reports through operations as well as to you, the board, on our status. Another thing that popped up, which isn't part of the staff report, was that one of the water tanks pump systems within the treatment plant that supplies water to our centrifuge failed last week, and so we had to have a consultant come up and place the pump. I'm expecting another invoice for about $2,000 for a pump replacement and the repair of that system. Without it, we wouldn't be able to run our centrifuge, which would keep our solids way too high, and again, it creates more problems. So that's my update on the wastewater treatment plant.
Thank you, Rick. That's
Yeah.
great. I'm too glad I had to deliver that bad news.
Well, please extend our thanks to the staff and to Derek. I mean, really, it was amazing.
The bad news would have been having to evacuate because we couldn't handle the system.
There was a phone call about 10 o'clock at night talking about that,
Yeah.
and luckily it never came to that. We were able to manage it. But we were on pins and needles for a little bit there.
I have a question. When is the best period in the year to actually be able to act on this? Is it May because there is less people, but there is a lot of water still running, or is there a preferred time of the year to actually do this involved maintenance on that plant?
Fall.
Huh?
Fall.
Fall. So, and you have, I'm assuming, every year something going on as a preventive maintenance.
We do.
Yeah. Because reading your report, it looked like we are on a thin edge on this plant. I mean, we could be in big doo-doo pretty quickly.
Literally.
Okay. Picture for right here. Snow removal. So, as mentioned earlier today, we at the last board meeting, we were tasked to try to come up with a way to review the snow removal operations and the performance stance. And as you know, and as Eric mentioned, that these would be reviewed in operations in the communications committees. Since that time, hats off to Bob Epstein and Corey and staff to try to implement this. Countless hours were spent behind the scenes to try to develop a way that staff could quickly pull a report and create, looking through averages to see how well we're doing within each contract. Without going into the minutiae and the details, this integrated analysis by shift and collections of shifts would be able to measure the snow removal operations and really meet the end or exceed the customer's expectations based on snow quality and available equipment. So to help us do that, we took a look at how we define our snow removal operations, and we basically broke our snow removal into 4 different categories for snow quality. There's a normal category that says, basically we'll be able to go out and perform the activities within 1 or 2 shifts, and the stars line up, all the operators are here, all the equipment's working. It's a perfect 6-inch storm on a Wednesday or Thursday, not a weekend. And we're able to basically hit every contract, do every driveway, and the GPS works, and we have good quality data that we can use to help develop contracts and manage our operations. Unfortunately, not every storm cycle is a perfect condition or perfect scenario. And in fact, this year, we did not get good data between November and really December 30th. Our GPS was not working on every piece of equipment. And so rather than making numbers up and trying to guesstimate what things happen, we're really not going to use that data. We're going to throw that out and we're going to start forward. And again, trying to do the best that we can to determine what we're doing and where we're doing it and how much time we're spending there. The other category for snow is catch-up, meaning that it's snowing so much that we're not able to complete the activity during the 1 or 2 shifts, that we need to go back and actually go back and hit driveways of homeowners who aren't here. This is especially important in East Meadows, where they've directed us only to do driveways that people are here, and we can bypass driveways of people that haven't been up here all winter long, with the intent that we'll touch them, but maybe not during the cycle. The third category is heavy, emergency situations, where we're just trying to maintain open roads for emergency equipment, for people to move around. And then finally, the last one is cleanup, where, we've got snowpack out there, wind drift, we have to go back and touch something up. The contract's completely done, but we want to go out there and do a little extra service, because we know with wind drifting, for example, it may look great in one person's driveway across the street, but the next one's got 4 feet of snow in it. So we want to try to clean those things up 2 or 3 days after a storm cycle. So using those 4 different qualities, we're able to kind of change the way we communicate to our customers as well as our staff on a daily basis. As you know, we give out notifications to homeowners of what's going on, how many people are out there, and what we're doing. And then the report you see on the screen here is basically a breakout of the different vehicles, which is another way for us to say, hey, we're not getting GPS data on this vehicle. We know you were out there, but T2 is missing. Where's T2? And so it's just another way for us to double check versus going to Fleet Track, our separate website, to verify that equipment's actually hanging and giving us the equipment. The one thing that Bob noted to me on the unique totals, this isn't the unique totals is actually the greater less than numbers from above. We don't want to double bill contracts, and so again, we don't want to duplicate time spent in a contract or an HOA. But again, it's a great tool that just got developed, and each day, in fact, this morning at I think 7:55, Bob sent me another email saying, "Oh, look, I've done this, and you can do this." And so, as we digest this a little bit more, and Eric and I have a little bit more time to do an analysis on it, we'll be bringing it back to the Operations and Communications Committee to report out. But again, I'm always amazed how quickly Bob and staff can get things going and then give us good, valuable data and information to help us, again, provide the best service that we can for snow removal. And that's my update, unless there's any questions. And Bob, I probably missed several things, but...
No, you covered everything. But the idea would be is if you take all the normal snow days, what percentage of our contracts were completed? You would hope 100%. If it's less, then that's a lower score. And so currently, we just broke it out by HOA contracts and driveway contracts. The other categories I thought we might do is in-resident driveways. Because if we had to prioritize, then that would show up. Maybe we get 100% of the in-resident, but less than 100% of the total. That might be because East Meadows says don't bother with that. So for each of the snow categories, that's what we do. There's also the categories. We're still going back and categorizing the data, so these numbers aren't totally accurate yet. But another category is commercial accounts, and that's like the generation, the power plant is not an HOA or a driveway. And then the other thing which we still have to fix is if somebody goes into the garage for 3 hours and comes out, the garage is a driveway. It shows they spent 3 hours in the garage. And so there's things like that. But the idea is to look at this on a contract basis. Last year we spent a lot of time making sure it was fairly allocated across different things. Now it's looking at, the goal here would be to say, for snow categories, did we do every contract that would be expected in emergency? If we got any done at all, that's upside. In normal, if we missed one, that's not good. So that's the idea behind the structure. And I think we would have it fully running by the next board meeting. So like Rick said, we'll just start reporting from kind of probably December 26th forward. And since we started working on this, there hasn't been any snow.
Right.
So I'm very concerned that there might be a correlation. So I'm going to stop working on it for a week and see if the snow picks up. But I can certainly use your help to look through and look for things. But the general approach, I'm interested in comments on.
Well, it's going to be tough to revert engineering what's happened. We may be better off to actually assuming, there's an assumption we can make is whatever we did in December should not be substantially different from what we'll do for the end until the end of the season, and just basically don't try to fix it.
Yeah. That's kind of our.
Yeah.
Because it would go back and require memory recall of what was the snow like that. So just going forward, we'll get 4 solid months in with it this year.
So is it 3 engine that was not reporting or just 1? Because
It was well, December 23rd it was 1, but before that it was 2. It was T1 and T4 or T5. T1 and T5. We're not reporting.
Yeah.
So as of December 30th, all we're reporting. That will be our start date.
And so now you have a mechanism so staff can check, so we don't we'll lose a whole month. Yeah.
Yeah, you can can just bring this up.
Yeah.
And
And
it's either all there what you think, or
exactly.
there's something going on. So, yeah.
Okay, so this will be topics for the operation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Great.
And the third item for me, or the topic, was the Caltrans conference call meeting we had yesterday, and I know that Terry Woodrow and Jeff Brown, supervisors, were attending that meeting, as well as Jessica. But I thought it would be good to update the board on really.
You just wait.
It's okay, I should have let you finish. I thought it would be important for the board to hear what the outcome of the letter that we sent last year to Caltrans expressing our interest to assist them in any way that we could to keep the road open, whether that's loaning them a mechanic, parts, or whatever it might be, to, again, keep that road open, keep the customers up here on those lifts. Since that time, we've had, I guess this is our second conference call with Caltrans, with all the agencies, CHP, supervisors, District 10 staff, and of course emergency personnel to kind of communicate before big storm cycles. And so appreciation to Caltrans for implementing this. And here's highlights from yesterday's call. If I've missed anything, please let me know. They report out that they're basically at 100% staffing, and if they're not, they'll bring people up from the valley to backfill. So they have operators and people to man the chain control stations at Peddler Hill and or Red Lakes, or wherever it might be. They've purchased and implemented and actually have in now at Peddler's Hill and Cables Lake 2 campers, like you see, you're probably familiar with these on Highway 50 and Highway 80, where there are pickup trucks with a camper shell behind it. But basically it's a bigger presence for the motorists to see, and hopefully the goal there is to get more people to stop and actually not blow their chain controls, and make sure that they realize, especially the truckers, that we're going into a chain control area and not get stuck on the top of Carson Pass and jackknife and close the road for several hours, which has happened in the past. They're testing a new blade at Peddler's Hill. I don't know what the outcome of that is, but they're trying new things. They have one brine trailer at Woodford's right now. That trailer is the only one on Highway 88 between here and Peddler's Hill, and so when they've been using brine, which has been very effective according to them, and for me, I see it on when I drive on the highway. It seems like it does pull up the ice much better, and roads are much safer. But they're looking to get a second brine trailer. There's one out for Dynamo that they're going to bring up to Peddler's Hill, so pretty soon we'll hopefully have 2 brine trailers to work the highway. They're testing a new sand spreader that uses a better spray pattern as well as less product. And so that's down in the District 10 yard today, and they're going to bring that up. They have 2 mechanics that are working 24 hours. And so if they have issues with blowers or equipment, they'll respond to that, especially on the weekends, where in the past they haven't had that. Probably the most important thing is that the current Quick Maps program, they're constantly trying to improve it and keep that as the most up-to-date place for the public to check. But they want to start possibly in a pilot program using push notifications. So if you're using that app, they'll have a banner that'll pop up and say, hey, we're going to close the Carson Spur in 30 minutes. It hasn't been implemented yet. It's still in their legal counsel stages. But their hope is to get that implemented this year. So again, it'd be a great way for us to find out what's happening with the spur and or Carson Pass. And then finally on January 25th is Vail Resort's annual safety day. And so I'm not sure what participation that Caltrans will be doing with that. I actually had to drop off the conference call at that moment. But I know that the resort's going to be bringing in outside agencies, helicopters and so forth, and KMPUD Fire Protection District's going to come up for that. But just, again, kind of a safety day for the resort, but they're going to stretch that out to the highway as well, and be a good way to communicate to the customers coming to Kirkwood. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah. So one thing that they said, I know that you had to drop off the call at that point, that they said that Alpine County Search and Rescue Command vehicle would be up here for tours, and then they were going to try to do some sort of tours that Caltrans would bring something up so that people would have something to look at. I don't know what that would be, and Dan said that he would work on making sure that that happened.
Oh, good. So I think that's the notes from I had from the call, but just wanted to let you know that stuff's happening on the highway. Good stuff.
Did you say brine on the
Brine.
track? Meaning salt? I didn't know they were allowed to salt it in a national forest, but they are.
They don't call it salt, they call it brine. So you tell me what the difference is.
It's the lines that you see on the highway. It keeps the ice from forming. It makes it easier for them to lift up the pack.
Okay.
And it's why your car turns white. It's why you have to wash your car a lot.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. To answer your question, I'm not sure how that
What
was
it-
approved or how,
What it is. Okay.
but it's out there.
Well, first of all, thank you, Bob, for all your work on the snow removal stuff. And Rick, that's a great report on Caltrans. Thanks. That's terrific. Okay, we'll go on to standing committee reports. Did any of the committees meet? So we're starting up later this month for our meetings.
Finance was the only one that met.
Anything, Standish? We covered everything.
Yes.
Standish? Okay. And then temporary advisory, Rick's already mentioned the summer festival. Is there anything on the playground committee to report?
January 18th, 4 to 6 at Red Cliffs Lodge. There will be an event there, an informational event, soliciting input from the community.
And Ann O'Grady emailed me asking me if I know of any architects or others who have experience in playground design, particularly using natural materials. And I don't, but I suggested contacting the American ALS Landscape Association, but also Ann Floor.
So I will send
So
you-
you'll send me the contact information on that.
Yeah, just in general, we got the survey results back. In that were a lot of comments that implied some misunderstandings. People saying you should fix the tennis courts while you're at it. So we're going to do a Q&A that clarifies who's responsible for what and why this is just the playground, which is our only jurisdiction, things of that sort. Also, there's so many choices of playground materials that one of the things I think we're going to explore is, as opposed to us deciding who we want to buy from, instead invite some form of solicitation process. I think the complexity is it's not the lowest price, least responsible bidder, because somebody may may propose one set of, there may be two at the same prices, and one appeals to us, design appeals to us more than the other, that it's not going to be down to measurements. I'm not sure what advice we need on how to run an RFP process if if we're choosing between designs as opposed to something that's very specific. Once we get the community area, we then will work on fundraising and trying to get a design in place.
Great.
The only thing I'd add is you've applied for an Epic Promise grant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we
Right,
hope
yes.
to hear soon, like next week.
Monday, after the meeting.
Okay. We move on to item 13, general discussion. Are any items for new board topics or other anything that board members want to bring up? I was just going to say that, again, I want to be sure to get Bruce Gianola here to give us an overview of the economic development structure that's being proposed. I just think I would like to understand it. It's vague for me. And the other is, I know that each committee is going to go through goals, just a 6-month review. I think it'd be nice to have just a quick summary of that on our next board agenda. Anything else? Okay, with that, we are retiring to a closed session. This is regarding labor negotiation, Government Code 54957.6. This is about the general manager contract. And just to note, this is one of the things that Eric learned that he conveyed to me, is in this closed session, we can talk about the elements of the contract. We cannot talk about the compensation piece. That would only be in open session. Okay. So we will return to open session and report on the closed session before we adjourn. Okay. And will we go into the conference room?
Whatever you want.
Yeah, why don't we go into the conference room? Back in open session. Wait for just a second. We're back in open session. Just reporting that we discussed a proposed contract amendment for our general manager. No action was taken. We'd like to put this on the February 1st agenda. And with that, I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.